Hi, welcome, and thank you for tuning in today, as it were. And I just want to encourage you over the whole subject today of being hungry and how important it is that we are a hungry people. What sparked this off was thinking of that verse in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5. It's verse 3, where Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." And it's an interesting verse because we know, first of all, he's not talking about being poor financially, but he's talking about poor in spirit. Now, if it was poor financially, you would have said, whoa, hang on a minute. Jesus, why are you saying it's blessed to not have enough money? That doesn't sound right. But I also want to say it's a bit of a shock when you think, blessed are the poor in spirit. Why? Because you are poor in spirit, are you blessed? I'll tell you why. Because when you think you have everything and there's no more to have, then you've already got as much as you're going to get. And there is nothing else to come. But if you know that there's more, you're going to press in for more. So you are blessed because the kingdom of heaven, as he says, is yours. It's interesting, he's talking to his disciples too, not to the crowd. So it's not like he's talking to those who aren't saved. He's talking to the disciples who should know a lot of these things. And he's saying, you got to keep that sense of being poor in spirit. I think it's more than being humble. I think it's having a hunger. Because when there is that hunger for God, God always responds. He's looking for hunger. You know, hunger is obvious when it's there. I told you about, some of you, that I went to India on a mission trip a while back, and we gave out rice in one particular village, and people came from the whole village, a whole crowd. It must have been the whole village turned out, because these guys and these people, these ladies, were giving out rice. And it's like there was a hunger. Not only that, there was a hunger for healing. So I also said about when we were in the town and we started praying for people, and we got into trouble because we had people coming from all over the town wanting to be prayed for. There was a hunger. We had people bringing their children, pray for my son. You know, I want him to do well at school. Pray for him. My goodness, can you imagine that down your local high street? But that's the way it was. There was a hunger. So struggling with the way that India is at the moment, because they are lovely people. But anyway, another story. God is looking for hungry hearts, and hungry hearts are obvious to God and to others. So you see hunger all over the Bible, you know. One of the great examples of hunger was Moses. He had a real hunger for God, this man, in such a way that he was prepared to lay his life down to have God and have more of God. In Exodus 20, you know, they're at Mount Sinai. He's out in the desert with all the Israelites, and he's got up Mount Sinai. He's got the 10 Commandments. But God is doing this sort of sound and light show, this incredible thunder, lightning, black clouds, everything, you know, and it's pretty scary. It's pretty scary. And in verses 18 and 19 of chapter 20, it says, when the people saw the thunder and lightning and heard the trumpet and saw the mountain in smoke, they trembled with fear. Can you blame them? This is God doing this. They stayed at a distance and said to Moses, speak to us yourself and we will listen. But do not have God speak to us or we will die. They were right, you know that. They realized that unholy people in front of a holy God, you are consumed. There's no way you can stand in front of a holy God unless somehow he allows you to do it. And they knew that, and they knew it was finished. And it says, the people remained at a distance while Moses approached the thick darkness where God was. Moses was so desperate for the presence of God that Moses would go into it was almost like, I don't care if it costs me my life. I am going in to meet with God. I am going in. This is more important than anything. You may have to, guys, you may have to come after and drag me out later on, and you might find my shriveled body or whatever, but I am going to, whatever it costs, I am going to lay my life down for him. And in fact, there was a time, wasn't there, where Moses did see the presence of God. In Exodus 33, we read about where God put Moses into a cleft of the rock and put his hand over the cleft so that Moses wouldn't see all of his presence, but only his back as he was going away. That is as much as Moses could have. Moses wanted God's presence. He wanted to see him. And God, out of his heart of love, knowing that it would kill Moses if he saw him in his fullness, out of his heart of love, he sort of said, yes, okay, but I'm putting you in this cleft of the rock. And how sweet, almost sweet, sort of like a father looking after a child. He puts his hand over the cleft so that Moses is not consumed, but actually gets what he asks for. He sees something of the presence of God, something that others don't see. Where there's hunger, you'll see more than people who haven't got that hunger. When there's hunger, you're going to see more of God. And don't tell me there's not more. There's always more of God. But I always say there's always more. There's always more. Because if you have the fullness of God, you're dead. So while you're breathing, you have not got the fullness of God. Because if you ever saw the fullness of God, then you wouldn't survive. It's one of the heart attitudes, that hunger that God looks for. There are certain attitudes, aren't there? But love and desire or hunger are two key things God is looking for amongst his people. And no doubt you could do a Bible study on that, no doubt, but looking those words up. But in 1 Corinthians 14 and verse 1, we've gotten together, follow the way of love and eagerly desire spiritual gifts. There they are, they come together. Follow the way of love and eagerly desire spiritual gifts. Desire, hunger, spiritual gifts. And it's interesting what those words mean. I mean, follow the way of love actually means to pursue, to strive, to run after. Interesting that, isn't it? We sometimes think that because we are God's, then love is just going to come naturally. But it says pursue, run after. You might have found that it's not always easy to love, that there are times that it's not easy to love people. There are times when it's a struggle. Have you found that? I'm sure you have. But love, we have to pursue. Interesting. And then desire, earnestly desire. That word there can mean also be covet spiritual gifts. That covet, we know in the Ten Commandments, don't covet what your neighbour's got. That it was a negative thing. That strong word, it's a very strong word. Don't covet, don't go, I've got to have it. It's like when I see a nice car, like a sleek BMW or Audi or something, and I think, what have they got that for? I've got my Ford Fiesta and they've got a nice sleek Audi. And God says to me, no, John, you be grateful for what you've got. And, I have to pull myself up short. Have you ever been there? No, I'm sure you're better than me. But I have to just think, no, I can't be that way. But here, God says, yeah, do covet, do hunger after. What? Spiritual gifts? Well, the word there actually means spiritual things. In the context, yes, it is spiritual gifts, but it means spiritual things. We are to have a hunger for things of the Spirit, and God responds to that. God, it's a natural response. Hunger creates a response. Have you seen, the situation with COVID, with people playing football and no crowds? You've got these big matches and they haven't got a crowd there. What's that like when the team goes out onto the pitch and they're playing and there's not the shouting and the encouragement? There's nothing. Because it's absolutely quiet. Must be very, very strange. It's the same as I've seen some of these comedy panel shows where they're filmed without an audience, and somehow they struggle because an audience draws more out of them. So you can make a joke or something that's funny, but if you don't get that ripple and response from the audience, then something falls a bit flat and it's hard. Hunger draws out a response. Every preacher knows it. You go and you preach and you get a response back from the congregation. It draws more out of you. That response is important. If it falls flat, then you realize that actually you're falling flat. You just cannot produce the same. Same with worship teams. If the congregation is hungry to worship and as soon as they start, they're in there and they're really keen to get into the presence of God, then that affects the worship team too. And they rise up, their faith level builds, if you like, and they connect better with God. And then that feeds back into the congregation. And we create this environment of faith where God can be present. Just as a little aside, that's something to bear in mind when we meet back together again. Whether you are on fire affects the person next to you. If you can carry the fire of God, you're going to help them burn. If you are a bucket of cold water and you're not hungry and in there, you could put their fire out. It's important that we are all pushing forward and burning together, if you like, so that we bring the presence of God. There's an interesting story which is challenging in Matthew chapter 15, verses 21 to 28. It's the story of the faith of the Canaanite woman. And it says this, let me read it to you. A Canaanite woman from that vicinity came to him crying out, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is suffering terribly from demon possession." Jesus did not answer a word. So his disciples came to him and urged him, "Send her away, for she keeps crying out after us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel." The woman came and knelt before him. "Lord, help me," she said. He replied, "It's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to their dogs." "Yes, Lord," she said, "but even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table." Then Jesus answered, "Woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted," and her daughter was healed from that hour. Jesus seemed a bit hard there to you? Let me tell you what he was doing. He was drawing out faith. He had his first priority at first was to go to the Jewish people. This woman was outside, and Jews often hated Gentiles and so on. And so Jesus is actually playing against that. Not very PC in this world, I'm sorry. But what he's doing is he's saying, if I ignore you, will you give up or will you keep on? Have you kept on pressing in where sometimes you feel God is ignoring you? And then he says about the dogs under the table. He's not being rude. He's talking about the little dogs. It's just a picture. But she comes back with a response and he realizes this is a woman who is pushing through whatever barriers I put in. This is what he was doing, drawing out faith. Sometimes I think when we go through difficult circumstances, God is drawing out faith. He's allowing certain things to draw out your faith so that it gets stronger. And he said to this woman, "I have great faith. You have great faith." He didn't say that to many people. Look back what Jesus says about somebody's faith. Rare that he says that you have great faith. This woman is put above a lot of the Jewish people that he ministered to. There's something about hunger that draws a response out of God. So what does it mean if we're not hungry then? Well, we've all been there at some time where we've lost our desire for God. And it means we're sick if we're not hungry, doesn't it? If we're not hungry, there's something wrong. We are sick in the natural and in the spiritual. Perhaps it's because we don't know, we don't believe what is available to us. There is so much that God is doing in the world. Just because you don't see it on the news, try and just find out what is God doing in this world. Let's become part of that, because there is so much going on, and it's possible, it's for you as well. He hasn't left any of us out. Perhaps it's because we don't know how good he is. Yeah, he's a good God. He just, like a loving father, wants to give you good things. We can also feel spiritually flat for other reasons. I mean, we have body, soul, and spirit. So if anything is wrong, body, soul, or spirit, it affects the other one. So you can be under enemy attack, and that can make you feel flat. You can be physically tired or physically ill, and that can affect your hunger for God. You can be emotionally upset. You can be dealing with grief or pain, and that will make you that way. Mental pressures, struggles, that will have the same effect. So if we deal with those things, then we will find our hunger will return. But how do we get more hungry? Well, participation in what God is doing is going to increase your hunger. Because once you get a taste of what the Holy Spirit is doing, once you're involved, then you will get to like that place where this is the way I want to live my life. There is nothing else worth living for than this. It's like this is it. Once you sense God's supernatural move and see what he's doing, and you say, yes, this is worth living and dying for. Like Moses, what else do I want? Christianity isn't a non-participation sport where we just sit and watch from the sidelines. We all are to get involved. And another problem we might have is that we focus on the food. Or rather, we don't focus on the food, we focus on other things. Can you imagine sitting down to a table of food, a plate of food, and you look at the tablecloth? That's your focus, or the cutlery around it. It wouldn't make much sense, would it? We need to focus on the food. Jesus is our food. That's what we focus on. But we can get distracted. Distraction is an enemy of the soul. You know that? And we can get so easily distracted. Some of those distractions, some are quite normal. Other ones are, we can focus on our problems, on our lack, on our illness, or whatever, on our need, rather than on Jesus. And we need to not be in that place. Sometimes it's like, God's not going to bother with me. I'm not, little on me, I'm not good enough. And all those sorts of things come in. And that takes away our hunger. We have to understand it's for you. It's for me. God is not missing anyone out. He's no man's debtor, as they say. And sometimes it's about, do we realize that we're empty? Have you ever been in that place where you're so busy that you forget to eat, and it gets past your normal dinner time or lunchtime or whatever, and suddenly you look at the clock and you say, oh my goodness, I forgot to eat. And suddenly you realize you're really hungry. Sometimes we don't know. We think we're okay. And it's not until we need more of God that we realize we're spiritually starving. And that's why we need to constantly put ourselves in a place where we are always at risk, where we need God, or we can't manage without him. If we think we can do the Christian life without God, then that's not normal Christianity. Normal Christianity is about risk. It's about this cycle of hunger, risk. We step out, and then discovering that we lack in some area. So we push in, we get more hunger for more of God. We get closer to Jesus. We then take another risk, and then we realize that we actually need yet more in another area. And so we get closer to Jesus again. There's that hunger again. It's an ongoing thing as we risk and push out. Are you hungry for more of him? Are you hungry? He loves to answer that call. When we meet again, I want to ask you, will we be like this picture I had of starving masses just against the wrought iron gates of a mansion, pushing up against the gates, faces pressed against the metal, hungry, desperate, for more. They know that in that mansion is everything they could possibly ask for. And they're desperate, hungry, pressed from behind by the crowd. And you know what? That's where we need to be. Now, I know some of you are in that place. Some of you have been seeking him during this time, and you're just desperate for more and more of him. And who knows, there is, you can have so much on your own, but there is something about seeking him in community together that creates an extra dimension of his presence that we are hungry to get back to. But I want to give you some encouragement from that picture, because that picture unfolded and the hunger brought him out, always brings Jesus out. And he opened the gates, and the gates open wide, and people are invited into a massive banquet where there is enough for everybody. There is no special place set for me or anyone else. It's all there, and it's all for you as well. God has it all laid out. It's there. Our hunger gives us access. I want to encourage you. Let's be ready. Let's be hungry. Let's be on our starting blocks for what God has for us in the future. Because if we are hungry, then we can light a fire within ourselves that will light a fire within those around us, and the blaze will reach out to those around. We cannot, who was it? Somebody who said that, I set myself afire and people come to watch me burn. Well, what if we all burn with the presence and love of God? I leave you with that challenge. God bless you.